at Inform Your Community, we offer events that combine important, impactful topics with some fun activity. And you can find out more about us at www.informyourcommunity.org, as well as you can sign up for our mailing list there, and encourage your friends to do so. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment. And of course, we welcome donations. So if you do want to help us keep our events free, all of our events are free, including for our crafting events or children's crafting and adult crafting. We send the kits out for free. Please, we encourage you to make a donation for that. So this is part of our Know-It-All series, and where we invite experts to come talk about different topics. And today's topic is civil rights and music. And civil rights is an important topic for so many reasons, of course, but civil rights and music in particularly. Here's just an example of some interesting statistics that highlight this point. 60% of music, 60% of people say music motivates people to fight for societal issues. And for the 18 to 25 year old age group, that increases to 70%. So there is a strong connection between societal issues and advocating for them and music. But sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it can be different social things that we do can be important for change, but sometimes people can think like, well, why is that really connected? For example, the idea of taking a knee, 48% of people say that that's completely related. And while 6% are not sure, so 48% think like, yes, this is great for, taking social action. 6% are not sure. And then the rest actually don't think it's a great idea for social action. So it can be complicated. Sometimes when you're integrating arts and civil rights together, and other types of activities. But still, music is a powerful force, no doubt, to make change in relation to civil rights. If you remember back in the day, Live Aid, 1.5 billion viewers watched that on television and in person in 1985. And then We're the World, also back in the day, sold 1 million copies in its first weekend. So great examples of music and kind of fighting for social issues and advocacy. So throughout the discussion today, if you have any other questions, feel free to use the chat function. We also welcome you to use emojis, tell us how you feel, and we'll try to get those questions answered and any comments expressed as well. To the extent possible, we do want to spend time with our absolutely amazing speakers here today. And so I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So why don't we just start off with our wonderful speakers today, to have them introduce themselves and tell us how they're related to this topic, what brought them here. Why don't we start? Liz, do you mind being the one to kick us off?
I don't mind at all, but I think you should give us a time limit.
Okay. Well, let's say a minute each for this one. That's
most helpful. Yeah, okay? No, I think that's really good. Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Stuckey Sundy. For those of you that might have recognized my middle name, which Sal did, you're going to meet Sal in a moment. Stuckey, my dad is Paul Stuckey of the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Brian, be quiet. We're all worthy. We're all worthy. That's what Dad would say. And so my connection is kind of interesting because on the one hand, I was backstage girl for a lot of his work in this space of civil rights and music with the trio and throughout. I mean, they were active all of their lives. He is now the last surviving member of the trio. However, I think another key piece that I bring to the table here today, and I'm really excited to be part of the discussion, is my dad and I have created an organization, a national nonprofit called Music to Life. And we work with contemporary musicians to help them step off the stage and into their communities, to actually kind of package their ideas for music-based change. So we help them become what we call social impact entrepreneurs. So we train them to connect with community partners, to write grants, to really develop kind of sustainable ways that music can be part of addressing the issues of our time. So that's all I'll say for now, but I'm sure there will be more. Thanks hopefully that was a minute. Okay.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Sal, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Sal Falica. I teach at New York University. I'm interested, of course, in anything concerning media, culture, and communications, which is what I teach at the university. So, uh, my interest in particular has been music that we might call topical songs or protest songs, or as Dylan used to call them, finger pointing songs. And they have a fairly long history in American popular culture. So basically, that's where I'm at.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And Morgan, will you share? Welcome, Sal. Morgan.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. And thank you for the invitation. My name is Morgan Jolly. I've spent the last 20 years in education, teaching middle school, high school, collegiate, at the collegiate level, most recently at Queens College in New York City. And I'm in upstate New York now, and just started a nonprofit with the emphasis on health and wellness of singing, barrier-free access to vocal ensembles. And I was saying that all along within my teaching practice, I've always had a little hidden agenda of activism in me. My mom was friends with Abbie Hoffman before he passed away. I grew up watching her protest and be very active in her civil rights and responsibility, and like mother, like daughter. And I've always promoted using our voices, and especially in song.
That is wonderful, and I love the connection to it's really an extremely important civil rights figure. Thank you so much. And so without further ado, let us get Brian to join us and tell us about himself.
Okay, my name is Brian Cogan. I have, well, I'm right now at Malloy University. Used to be Malloy College, so I'm getting myself used to saying that. Um, been there for 20 something years, and I used to teach at NYU and the College of Staten Island, which I still love both. And of course, that's where I met wonderful people like Stacy and Sal, etc. Um, my expertise is primarily in punk rock. I am probably best known, sorry, I'm going to unzip here,
Yeah.
for the Encyclopedia of Punk. It's probably going to be, look a little weird on this screen, but I've written a bunch of books, mostly about music and civil rights. To me, especially, is I am a card-carrying punk. I know that because I made a card for myself years ago that said card-carrying punk, and I then lost it. Um, but it's one of the things that the punk movement in particular argued about. And while there are many, many great people in the skinhead movement, especially in England, um, a lot of them were racist. And one of the times I got beaten up outside a show was trying to rescue an African American man from a gang of skinheads. And let me tell you, it was not a fun experience, but to me, the punk movement is about equality, it's about civil rights, it's about feminism. Riot Girl in particular is about that. And in terms of that, there was a great movement in England called Rock Against Racism, which was very important and got most of the major bands from the 70s out there to protest against racism. And even if they didn't think it was particularly an issue, especially during the Thatcher years, it was a major issue. And it was a major issue in America, and a major issue during the hardcore movement, too, in America. And it unfortunately is still a major issue today. And I think the more I work on projects involving punk rock, um, trying to get things out, trying to write books, trying to write articles, etc., trying to do collaborations, the more I think that civil rights is an integral part of it and will always be an integral part of it, whether
Thank you.
right down or
Thank
not.
you. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. And we're going to,
I took too long. I sorry.
thanks so much for that. Let's start talking about, right from there, you've already started giving us some great examples of what civil rights and music could look like. I wonder if some of our other panelists want to tell us what, when we talk about civil rights and music, what do we mean? What gets left out? Why is it important? And so, Brian, you shared a lot on that as well. Who else wants to add?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot in our work is the musician as volunteer activist. And so I think one of the ways it can be very, very hard for, especially for the, millions of independent musicians that exist right now in this country, for them to both put themselves out on a limb in some of the ways, frankly, Brian, that you're talking about. I mean, we see this, folks going out on the picket line or sort of putting themselves out there with a controversial song, while also still, needing to put food on the table and a roof over their head and maintain their career and their artistry. So I guess I'm I don't know if I'm answering a question or asking one, because I feel like that is a classic dilemma right now, I think, for artists in this kind of activism, civil rights space, certainly right now. And I'll answer it in the, from where we come in our space. We are trying to help those activists think about pathways to sustainability by considering the issue area, whether it's, let's say, suicide prevention, drug, let's say the opioid crisis, sort of issues that know no political, that are not necessarily political, but that affect us all, and how and help them develop programs that can address the issue as opposed to the politics around the issue. Through that channel, find the grants, find the partners, find the underwriters, the stakeholders so we can bridge divides, essentially. So that's kind of, and stimulate the economy at the same time. That's kind of where we sit. But the individual musicians still, and many of our musicians are coming to us with this real dilemma, sort of, how do I expose myself? How do I do what I feel is right and expose and potentially risk, right, exposing myself and jeopardizing my career? I think that's a very real concern. So I just wonder what others maybe I'm, answering a question with a question. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Actually, if I may jump off of that, and this jumps off of what Brian had talked about too, with feminism in particular. So music gave women an opportunity to have a voice and a spotlight through this period where that wasn't necessarily happening in other forums. And so that was, I think, an important part that that gets left out, just the vehicle for feminism, the vehicle for women's liberation, and the vehicle for promoting the leadership of women within our country and within civil rights, as well as globally. I think globally, I know that we are talking about American civil rights. I believe we're talking about the civil rights in the United States, but I think about the inspiration of globally. You look at countries like Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, who had the singing resistance that they used to fight their occupation in the USSR and use that for liberation. So pretty powerful.
How do you folks respond, or have you ever had a conversation with somebody where they've said, music should stay out of politics, and those are two separate things, and music should just be for fun, and it's not about social activism? Anybody have an example of a conversation that they've
I
had?
hate to say that, but that is every Springsteen fan out there.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's just like, Bruce, don't talk about politics.
Not every Springsteen fan.
Yes.
Not every Springsteen fan.
Yeah, but it's Sal, as you know, it's a lot of people are like going, no, don't talk about Trump, don't talk about racism.
Well, it's
Uh,
true. You bring Springsteen into it. He's a kind of modern troubadour who does talk about who is extremely political, more so than I think almost anyone uh, at that level, I think. And his song Minneapolis is quite good, but and it was, you know, appropriate. But I just want to go back to a point. I think uh, I forget who was actually making it, but when you talk about civil rights and music, you have to. It depends on what historical moment you want to plug into. I mean, most of us here would think or connect, right? Um, Civil rights music in the 60s,
Mhm.
with the rise of Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Odetta, and that whole generation of performers who brought topical songs, songs that had a political intent to them. But in the history, in the United States anyway, in terms of African American liberation movements, music really and civil rights really begins in the church, in the African American church. Those hymns that were sung in African American churches became civil rights anthems. I'm thinking of the song "We Shall Overcome," which started out as a hymn in very early 20th century. It was "I Will Overcome," and then Pete Seeger changed it. Uh, I think at the behest of Martin Luther King. I'm not sure. They were at one of those folk conferences, and he changed it. But that connection to music demonstrations and history um, goes all the way back really to the 19th century when that music really became more prominent. And I was thinking also of the song "Strange Fruit,"
Oh yeah.
which became uh, believe it or not, a song about lynching became a pop hit. It was written, many of you know this, it was written by an English teacher at DeWitt Clinton High School. He happened to be a communist. It was the 1930s, and almost everyone who had a rational mind in those days was a kind of a communist. And he had seen a picture of a lynching, and he wrote a poem for the Teachers Union newspaper called Bitter Fruit. And then he, with his wife and a composer, made the song into Strange Fruit. And then he brought it to uh, not Larry Josephson, but I forget Josephson's first name, but it was Cafe Society. It was down on West 4th Street, one of the few integrated clubs in New York City. And he brought it to Billie Holiday, who at first didn't want to sing it for all the obvious reasons. And then it became her signature piece. So and that became a kind of, and that was the 1930s, a kind
I'm
of
wondering,
precursor
I,
to the
I'm one, so sorry.
1960s.
I'm wondering too. So you brought up we wouldn't know about, some of us might not know that it goes back to, even earlier. Is there anything else surprising that you folks want to share about this topic of civil rights and music that people might not be aware of?
Well, are we going into the future yet? Because there's, I know when we first started with Music to Life, there was a lot of, oh, the songs that, the 60s and, oh, they just don't exist anymore. And I think at this point, we've been around long enough and that I don't hear that as much these days because I think there is a real movement in all of our media channels that use, that where music is this kind of right, this voice for civil rights. I just, the way we see it these days, which is so incredibly inspiring, is talented musicians across genres come to us and they say, well, I want to I want to manifest this notion of music and civil rights in my community, right? So for example, Paolo Dumankis is one of our artists in Austin, and he is a jazz trombonist who has this incredible organization. I think it's Austin for Activist Arts or something like that. But the program he is working on with us, because we have an incubator program for artists, and what he's working on with us is Jazz on Wheels, because he feels like in the Austin music scene, what's happening is jazz is increasingly becoming kind of an exclusive art form for those that can afford to, go to that bar, pay that cover charge, pay that 2 drink minimum. And so what he's working on is bringing jazz as this, incredibly, historically rich art form essentially back to the people by bringing it into laundromats and other kind of places that are more local, and doing a very concerted effort to find new Americans and immigrants who want to kind of be part of the jazz tradition, and kind of integrating them into these performances. And so it's like this living, I think my thing is for me and where I'm sitting in terms of civil rights right now, I love the fact that we have a network of 460 artists doing this, but I love seeing artists who are actually physically manifesting civil rights through their music and stuff. Yeah, Brian, you have your hand raised. I don't know why I'm just saying.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
my wife just walked in, so I was waving at her.
Oh, you're waving.
Oh.
Oh, well, I'm
about
sorry, I
that.
get on some soapboxes because I
Well, I
really
think
do.
no,
I'm
no. I
so
think
inspired by
you
what
make
our
a
artists are doing.
you're making a very important point there, and to me, it reminds me of the DIY, do-it-yourself aesthetic in punk rock, which was people playing in laundromats, people playing in backyards, people playing, wherever they could, and usually with incredibly empowering messages. Once again, there were the racist people, but they were generally shunned for very good reasons.
Mm.
And,
It, mm.
oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, 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 go ahead. I was just going to say, I love love the local aspect of what, um, you folks are talking about. So there's like the big 1960s civil rights in music, right? Where it's like Woodstock and then even like these 80s, kind of like Live Aid and huge. But there's also this very kind of local component that is like integrating it into the communities that
Yes.
kind of the grassroots starts, the big things start at the grassroots, right? So I love that, and I appreciate in the chat we've got some clarifications and other insights about music, and I'm going to throw into the chat as well that before this event Sal had given me some great songs from Bob Dylan that he wanted me to share with our audience today.
Is that being posted right now?
So yeah, I just put in
Well,
that
he's an
chat.
acquired taste.
I'll mention it for those who don't have the chat available, but it's Only a Pawn in Their Game, The Lonesome Death of Haiti Carroll, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, We Shall Overcome. Obviously, Sal already mentioned as well. So check those out. And Morgan, obviously you have a nonprofit, obviously Liz does too. You're just starting. So you're part of this kind of grassroots, get music into communities. What do you think about this?
Yeah, thank you. So what's really interesting about the timing of all of this is that we have a social and solidarity anthems concert coming up next week. So I happen to have been researching music for the past 4 months or so. And so all of this is very, very fresh in my mind. And so just the excitement of the community to use their voices in a powerful way. And of course, we've seen this in Minneapolis most recently with all of the sing-ins that have been done geared towards ICE protests and the people who are held up in their homes in those cities and in that city and other places. But something that I've been really intrigued by is the newer the newer songs. So Kendrick Lamar is somebody who's really standing out in my brain right now. And then Brian, of course, you're talking about punk, and so I grew up listening to punk. So I think about somebody like
Awesome.
Billy Bragg too, who's not punk, who's more of a folk, but
He was
from
folk punk.
yeah, but from that era, and who just wrote a song about Minneapolis as well. So there's so many new artists. There's a wonderful artist, activist named Melanie Demore. And if you don't know Melanie's work, she is absolutely incredible. So just, I'm really excited about the newer anthems that are coming out that are
Yes.
fitting our current situations.
Can I also say that sometimes the old anthems are repurposed, like the Dropkick Murphys version of Which Side Are You On, which is an astounding song and it's still resonant to
Right.
this day.
Sure.
But of course, they do a faster, louder version of it. But I think if, say, my students are hearing that, and maybe I admit to sneaking that stuff into my classes every now and then, but it's good for them to think this is music that I kind of understand. It's kind of the stuff that I listen to at home. Well, for some of them. Um, Not even getting into all the LGBTQ songs that disco was putting out there where no one was really getting the message back in the day. Um, but it's good to revisit those. And by the way, Liz, I have to say, um, my parents spent, my dad was a very, very right-wing guy, but my parents spent their courting years going to McDougal Street and seeing, for example, your dad, seeing Dylan, seeing just like in every folk musician of that era that they could, because it was for my mom. And, I grew up on those songs playing. So when I didn't know the connection until you mentioned it, but I was listening to Peter, Paul, and Mary when I was 6 years old, and Dylan, and, like Tim. It just like it goes on and on and on. And I think that,
By the way, I just want to chime in. Natalie Merchant has an exquisite version of Which Side Are You On? You would never think that she would do that tune, but it's an extraordinary tune, and you can find it, of course, on YouTube.
I will look for it after we're over. I can't hear you say it.
I'm not hearing you,
I'm so sorry.
Anastasia.
Yeah, got it. I'm so sorry about that. So it's really interesting to hear the synergy with different musicians, and then taking up other people's music and doing new versions of it and updating it. But also, I thought it's almost like catchy. But also, uh, what Brian said about his father, who had different views, being willing to share that space because
Yeah.
he loved his wife. I'm wondering, have it's so much a part of civil rights is like convincing somebody else, right? And somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with the idea. So does anybody have an example of when they've changed somebody's mind about some topic because of this musical connection?
Well, this is the music by doing kind of that I'm clearly on this kick right now. So Reese Palmer, who's actually become quite a well-known musician in her own right. She was one of our first Academy students, gosh, back in just about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And she came to us already having created the Color Me Country Foundation. And she kind of was, as a practicing artist, she was like, oh my God, what have I just done? I've created this organization that cultivates particularly country artists of color in this space that doesn't feel very welcoming to them. And she had created this whole kind of thing, but she also needed to tour and do all this stuff. So we worked with her. Part of what we do is we take the artist's big vision, we go, all right, let's break it down. Let's figure out how you can do something and, you know, tour and be your amazing self at the same time. So what we figured she could do is these stage takeovers. So this is going to your question here, Stacy, where she would, you know, I mean, not every country music festival is going to be open to this, right? But for those that were like, hey, just help us out. Like, we're ready, we're open, we're happy to be, you know, we're curious about how to diversify this genre. We just don't know where to start. She would offer them a curated stage of these kind of up and coming aspiring country music artists that she was working with or that she knew of. And it was super exciting. And so she was doing these stage takeovers, and she's got a great video of one of the ones, because what happened is she ended up being part of this festival in London. And it was just so exciting. And they flew her out there with her artists. And it was just kind of the kind of, wow, I guess we really are doing something important, and we are kind of forging. And, you know, some of these audiences will be mostly white audiences, right? But they're by modeling kind of what could be on stage. I feel like that's kind of one step, that's one way to do this work, right? So
Excellent point. Excellent. So it is by doing, yeah, as you started off saying, yeah. So in other topics that we discuss, it's often about, because we discuss a lot of topics that inform your community. It's often like, so let's engage in a conversation about this topic, but maybe this is the one topic where that's not the best way to convince somebody. The best way to convince somebody, although we're kind of demonstrating it right now, right? We're trying to convince people, right? Hey, there's this connection between civil rights and music right now. Look, we're talking about it, but that's not the typical thing. The typical thing is you just play the music, you just do it. So I love that. I love that idea. We also talked about some like historic moments. We've had a lot of like different names that have come up, which is great. And there's some more names in the chat, which is just amazing. So feel free to throw those names in there. And we've talked a little bit about history. Are there any historical moments that we've missed that we should mention that are big related to this? I mean, everybody knows the 60s and the civil rights, but do we miss anything?
Actually, I think there's a really important one that has become very political in recent years, thanks to the NFL moving it to the forefront. But something that is not always seen as a civil rights anthem is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And so that is a really important anthem. It was written by Rosamond Johnson, and I'm sorry, Rosamond composed the music. The poem was written by his brother, and it was performed in 1900 for 500 school children in Jacksonville, Florida, and as a poem in honor of Abraham Lincoln, and then became the NAACP called it the Black National Anthem, but that didn't happen until 1919. We didn't have a national anthem in our country until almost 20 years after that. And so, a lot of politically, we have a lot of people saying, hey, we should not have, it's creating more division. This became the Black National Anthem by the NAACP prior to us even having a United States national anthem. Prior to that, the song that was unofficially our anthem was actually a British song. Anyway, so I think that's a really important piece of music to bring forward in this conversation.
And I just have one clarifying question. You started off mentioning NFL. Was there an NFL tie-in, or was it NAACP?
Well, NFL as well. So I don't know, maybe I'm guessing here, maybe in about the last 7 or 8 years, this has become pretty controversial. It's not just the NFL any longer. Many sports, professional sports and collegiate sports are starting to play Lift Every Voice and Sing prior to games. But because it's become more in the forefront to the general public, it has become a little bit divisive, and it's worth having conversations about. You know, I was just talking to people from PBS today, and they had no idea that it was called the Black National Anthem long before we had an official Latin national anthem. And so teaching people about the history behind this is really important, I think.
Hey, Stacy, somebody's asking if this is going on YouTube.
Yes, this is going to be on YouTube, on our YouTube channel.
Great.
So yes, and I'll share the compliment. He said I'm enjoying this conversation so much. Well, thank you. So are we. I think I can speak for all of us, and so are we. So, and I love, Liz, that you are like fact checking in real time, because Liz is putting in the things that we're saying. She's putting the links to it in the chat. So I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
dual work there, Liz. So
Yeah,
very,
no, I'm doing the best I can. It's hard because I really want to be part of the conversation too. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to juggle, but I'm
no,
yeah.
I absolutely love it, and I appreciate it. It's so great. Brett, and so yeah, so there's a lot of yeah,
Well,
you're getting a lot of kudos in the chat there.
Oh,
So
thank you.
this is great. Yeah, keep it coming. So okay, so Brian, I'm sorry, were you going to say something? We were talking about important moments in history. Was there something you were going to add to that, or should I move on to the
I
next
would
question?
say something which a lot of people think was mundane is, say, Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock.
Mm.
All right.
And I think that was an astounding thing to do. And it was so, as far as I know, so unexpected. And people, liked him as a musician, but not thinking he's, a guy who would play a song like that.
Yeah.
And I can think of, I don't want to get into the minutia of punk, but when a band like Bad Brains started playing around DC, and it was for Rasta black guys, that they were in your face, they were all saying, we've got an attitude, which is a positive mental attitude, which they had taken from a self-help book. But I think it changed a lot of the punks who could be just as retrograde as people in many, many music scenes. They had finally said, oh my God, why aren't we listening to African American music? And just once again, to have someone uh, doing a stage dive onto you who's African American while singing these incredibly fast, amazingly lucid songs, I think really did change that scene. And we could probably, if we all put our heads together right now, we could probably choose 50 moments in music history that changed things, like, Strange Fruit, etc. And, you know, those were all things that were not appreciated at the time. They were not really thought of as this is going to change the world.
I,
But then again, If I Had a Hammer was not supposed to change the world either, but it was an amazing song that did, in a lot of ways, change the world.
so it's interesting, Brian, because we also had media channels that were not as dynamic, let's say, as today's media channels. And
True.
so change was going to kind of move slower. And one of the examples I love, and gosh, this isn't even modern anymore. I'm really dating myself. But when Macklemore did his Same Love, and that's another one I'm going to put in
Yes.
the chat. And it was so perfectly timed for our own mission and vision as Dad and I were creating Music to Life, because it was a singular example of a piece of music coming out right at a time legislatively when gay marriage was being
Yes.
explored, vilified, like just all the sides were kind of weighing in. And it's almost like, I mean, he just stepped in and just everybody's like, oh my God, it's about love. It's about love. And I mean, it still is one of my favorite songs of, that moved that sort of moved a generation and moved older generations that we didn't think could be moved, you know? So yeah, I'll go find that. Put it in the chat.
Answer a quick question. Back in 1 second.
Sure, no problem. And actually, oh, sorry, Sal, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, just to continue with the historical moments,
Yes, please.
you would never think somebody like Louis Armstrong would be a civil rights icon, and but he was in many ways. His reimagining of What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue I say reimagining because it was written for a kind of minstrel show. The song was written by Fats Waller for a minstrel show, Hot Chocolates, and it was basically a self-deprecating song from a black woman's point of view, uh, remarkably racist in certain ways.
Mm.
And what Armstrong hears the song that in the late 20s and reimagines it with his group, and in the 50s plays it, creates What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue? You can find it, of course, on YouTube. And if, in a sense, then it becomes a real indictment of white supremacy.
Mm.
And Louis Armstrong had a majority of a white audience. He had, well, he had a black audience too, but he had an international following. So his whatever he did on stage was taken into account.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's
Fits with your
one of the things that's striking me about what you all are saying is how all the different genres that we've covered is pretty fantastic, and the intersections between them, and they're all doing this great work. And then Brian's comment about the Star Spangled I'm sorry, not Star, the Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
right, playing this American anthem, right, and how when we talk about civil rights sometimes, and perhaps now arguably more than ever, it's like there's the people that want civil rights, want to advocate for certain things, and then there's the people who are pro-American, right, as if those are different things, right? And that Jimi Hendrix example, I can imagine it probably was controversial at the time, right?
Very
Because
much so.
right, because there's this like made up, fabricated division of the people who love America and the people who like civil rights, when it's the same, it's the
Okay.
same group.
Shameless family plug.
Yes,
My
please.
dad has created 2 new verses to America the Beautiful, and I really think they should be incorporated into our national anthem, and I can't help myself. I'm putting them in here. So,
Right.
because they're, there are things like, "O nation of the immigrant, the slave, the native son, whose loyal families labored here that we may live as one. America, America, renew thy founder's call. Let liberty and justice be the right of one and all." I mean,
Nice.
these are the kinds of lyrics that he has now written. He's got 2 verses. He's got another one about that's more of an environmental, that's sort of, I don't have them off the top of my head because I'm just excited by this conversation, but they are now in the chat, and they are so, I mean, he
Yeah.
gets standing
NFL
ovations
should
when he
pick that
sings
up.
them. So what's that? What's that,
The
Sal?
NFL
Sorry.
should pick that up.
NFL should pick that up. There you go. There you go.
Maybe.
Maybe they will.
Maybe they will.
I
don't know.
like, to
Yeah.
throw it out here, how many DJs I don't really go to that many clubs, but how many DJs, radio stations, etc., are playing a song like Public Enemy's Fight the Power and not really understanding what the song is about?
Yeah.
It's just like, listen to the lyrics for once, okay? It kind of stands out. It's a message.
There's a beautiful, so I go every year to the Folk Alliance International Conference, which is this extraordinary coming together of DJs and venue owners and just all, and because they are increasingly defining folk as kind of folk adjacent. So you've got country artists, you've got hip hop artists, you've got because folk is really not a genre these days. It's like it's music of the people, and it's very much how Dad and I define it. But you would love it, Brian. They have a meet the
Guthrie say
DJ.
that? Yeah.
What? Sorry.
Woody Guthrie say that? I think.
Oh, maybe he did, but hey, we're all just carrying it forward. But it's definitely his guided, because I think we have something like 39 genres represented among our artists. It's crazy. But you would love, they have at Folk Alliance, they have this Meet the DJ day, right? Where it's like
Nice.
38 DJs sit at these tables and these artists come in with their CDs, right? CDs and their little, and it's like, let's develop a relationship here so you can understand not only my music that I'm handing you, but also who I am as an artist. It's just love. Like, I wish the helicopter moment, it's packed. The room is packed. People wait in lines but it's a beautiful, like, there really is community behind music, and there really are people that care about the story behind, not only the music and the artist, like what the artist is bringing to the table. It's beautiful. So it still happens in these little pockets. It's beautiful.
So
Can I ask Liz a question? Liz, are DJs, would you consider DJs still kind of gatekeepers? Are they still the kind of gatekeepers that can, in fact, break what they call break a record or create buzz for an artist?
Not in, Obviously not in the way they used to be. I think but I think they can be very helpful. Dad uses, and there are kind of intermediaries, right, between the DJ and the artist community too. And Dad has used a couple of those. And I'm seeing Morgan nod her head, so maybe she has some thoughts there too. But yeah, I mean, so it's the issue these days is that there's so many channels through which music can travel, that it's really, I mean, yeah, I'm not in a great position to answer that. Most of the artists come to us looking for new ways to make money. They're just like, we're trying to break through as best we can. But the DIY musician's very real. Brian, I feel like you use that term as well, where it's like they make their own, it's like they're their own DJ, right? They make their own kind of promotion music happen. But Morgan, you're nodding your head. So
Yeah, I was just gonna, I'm just agreeing with you, and Brian's DIY music and music production, because of technology, anybody can produce music now, and they are, and because of social media platforms, anybody can publish their music, and they are, and so there's actually been an interesting study that was just published this week, I saw, that talked about the isolation of Gen Z, or excuse me, what's the newest one? Gen.
I think it's Gen Z.
I don't know if any of us know
No,
it.
it's the
It's one of them.
youngest ones. It's
one of them.
Alpha. Is it Alpha? Maybe it's Alpha.
Maybe it's Gen Z.
Yeah. So it was a study based on the isolation of musicking and how everybody's listening to their own music. Thank you, Jessica, for your help in the chat. So the isolation that's happening, and the fact that there are just so many ways to create and access music now. So yeah, Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, to me, one of the things I did when I first started making music, and I've always been a part of the punk scene, and scenes are a huge part of punk rock, is that I knew my band wasn't going to get signed. So instead, I looked up, this is pre-internet, how to put out a record, how to get it pressed, how to get um, the bags that you put the 7-inch sleeve in, and where to get the sleeves done. And friends did it for me for very cheap. And I really assembled 500 copies of our first single. And to me, that was not, anything that was a bad thing. It was a labor of love. And if you look at sort of the early days of rock and roll, I think, Sally, you might know this as well, that people used to sell records out of the back of their cars at gigs, like from the trunk.
It's
That's right.
so tough, Brian, nowadays because artists would love to sell merch and and it's because
Yes.
that's really where the money is. I mean,
Yes.
their margins are so I just talked to a musician today who has he was actually scheduled for Europe and they've put him off till November because of gas prices and like the whole thing. Like the margins are so thin for these musicians to go on the
I know.
road. So merch is where it's at, but like nobody buys CDs anymore. And I mean, I guess people will buy a t-shirt or something, but yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
This is why I pretty much just when I do my music, nothing about that is relevant to this, but it's always been on vinyl. Because a lot of people just think vinyl is a superior sound, etc. Um, and I did, oh, just seeing, I see, yeah, I did, I did cassette tapes for a long time too. And I
I,
never expected to make quote unquote money out of this. And I think anyone that goes into this industry expecting to make really good money is in some ways deluded. That you should try and make music because you have something to say. And I think Louis Armstrong would agree with that. Billie Holiday would agree with that. That so many people that we've talked about, well, they want to make some money, obviously.
Liz seems to have a counterpoint. Why don't you go ahead and tell us?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Brian. I mean, it's like we have to re-engineer artists' brains when they come to us because they have this sense of like, well, maybe I should have been a dog. I don't know. Maybe I should have been a doctor. I should have done, maybe I'm not worth it. And we spend 2 weeks in our incubator program building them back up and building their value back up. I know we're on the same team.
I think you need to enter your program. It needs to be
Because
building up.
they're extraordinary. I mean, they are extraordinary and they are so important and their vision and their voice and the way they can see the world, the way they can help us see the world. And then for us, they also have this other piece, which is they can build programs that can also help save the world. And so I don't know. We always tell them, what is your value? It's one of the hardest things we do with them, but we're like, look, name your value, and maybe it's $100 an hour, it's $500, whatever it is. And then if you want to start giving it away, that's fine. But name your value and be proud of that value and find it. Find it. Sorry.
I think Liz
I
makes
love
a
that.
really good point. The one of the reasons the folk revival of the 60s sort of went kaput, you might say, was because a lot of the artists didn't take themselves as valuable and as seriously as some of them did. So it's one of the problems I think of the many artists is that they don't see themselves in a commercial culture.
Yeah.
They don't see themselves as capitalists, is what they don't see themselves. And it's kind of difficult because there's always, it's always an industry. Even in the Middle Ages, art was an industry.
Yes.
It was the church who was it was the sponsoring industry,
Absolutely,
but
Sal.
it was an industry.
There is a social change marketplace, and we talk about that with them. A nonprofit, I mean, you know this, Morgan, a nonprofit still has to meet their bottom line. A nonprofit still
Yep.
has money. And if you come to them as an enterprising artist with an idea for how you're going to help that nonprofit meet their mission better, and you've got a music-based solution for that, well, let's go get a grant. Let's go get that underwriter down the street. There's money in the social change marketplace as well. So, yeah.
Agreed.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that we also are at 7:28, which means the event is at an end essentially. I do want to say Morgan put in the chat amazing conference related to some of these these ideas about intersections between different music and civil rights. Not the bent but not broken conference. So check that out. But also to say that, I was going to ask about concerns in this area, and you folks expressed a whole bunch of those, but also we can be a little optimistic to say, go out, buy music, right? So many people are like, oh, I can get this music off of this platform, or I don't need to buy that, but this is how we encourage. So, musicians who are affecting change in social actions and civic engagement and civil rights by patronizing them and buying their music, right? Making sure they get fair market value for what they're doing. And also, Jessica put in the chat, go to a concert. Absolutely. Go see a band at your local pub. Check
All I
those
do.
things out. So I am so grateful for all of you for coming here today, and for all of our wonderful guests for being here as well. We hope you enjoyed this discussion about civil rights and music, such an important one. And some of the values that we talked about today related to this topic are voice and the idea of social awareness, the relatability of the things that, you know, folks are doing, that it's music that's related to what people are experiencing is really important. How music is expression of these important ideas about civil rights. And the collective kind of action that's involved, right? It's not just one musician who can have this kind of a change on their own. They need that audience, those platforms, you know, the collaborators and the ideas to share, right? So be welcoming to those musicians who have ideas to share with you. To continue this discussion, we're going to send you our event video. You'll have access to it. We'll share our YouTube channel with you, so you'll be able to access the video, plus our infographic. You'll have it's not going to be up yet, but eventually we're going to get that infographic up on our website, so come back and check that out. Please consider committing to a weekly action related to civil rights and music. Certainly coming to this event is a great way to start, but definitely you can do more, right? You can enjoy not only going to see bands, but even musical theater, right? If you think about Hamilton, right? Urinetown, right? Rent when it came out. So these are, you know, performances.
Stuffs the musical, yeah.
I haven't seen that one yet. I'm going to have to check that out. So feel free to put in the chat some more if anybody knows some more. And also you can search for the First Amendment Museum. Who knew that was a thing? First Amendment Museum. And type in the word music, and you'll actually be able to find their virtual protest song virtual exhibits, which is really cool. I know that Liz has some Spotify lists for us. If we can't put it in the chat right now, we're going to get it to you afterwards. Okay, I haven't forgotten. Also, do something as simple as when you're listening to music, listen for the rest in the music, the part where they're not saying anything. Think about the value and the meaning that has to amplify the other messages, right? Something like in Schindler's List, and the theme song played by Itzhak Perlman, there's some rest in there that's very meaningful and poignant, adds, right, to what we're saying. And of course, to affect social change yourself, definitely become involved in activism for issues that you care about. Learn about the nonprofits that were mentioned in the chat by some of our attendees, as well as our wonderful nonprofits represented today. And please take a minute right now, and I know we're just a couple of minutes over, but please take a moment right now. We're going to put up a poll. If you would be so kind as to answer that poll. It's just a few questions. We'd appreciate it. And join us for our future events. We actually have a popcorn and chat event, or popcorn and chat program. That's a movie night program where we are going to be discussing the topic of community policing. And we're going to be watching the movie called The Force and then having a discussion with our audience afterwards. But we have tons of events on our roster right now. If you go to our website, www.informyourcommunity.org, you can find our events there. We have, I think, 15 between now and the end of June, so quite a lineup. We also have in-person events at our New York City chapter, so you can check those out as well. If it says NYC IYC or IYC NYC, you'll be able to find the New York in-person events. And if you're watching this again on YouTube, please like, subscribe, comment, and feel free to share with others as well. We always welcome those donations, so feel free to check out our website, have your friends sign up for our mailing list. And so grateful for everyone here today. And yeah, somebody put in the chat, go to a concert. It's a community, absolutely. There's some other shows to see, Ragtime and Suffs folks put in the chat. And fun fact, apparently, Liz is informing us that Suffs was created by a Music to Life juried artist, which is exciting. So check out, so lots of information in here. And I will, you can find our YouTube channel. It's Inform Your Community. But you'll be able to easily find us online. I should have that handy. I totally don't, Morgan, but you'll easily be able to find us online. And it's also on the bottom of our website. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here. Sorry we went over, and have a wonderful, wonderful night. We look forward
Thank
to
you
seeing you at future events. Thank you for a wonderful
so
Thank
much.
you, Stacy.
Stay